Imagine you hired the perfect candidate. They're smart, they're driven, just the right experience. You invest months in developing them, getting them up to speed on your systems, your strategy, and then just when they're getting the results you wanted, they resign. You're blindsided. And then in the exit interview, they don't sugarcoat it. They straight up tell you, I was never really sure what we were doing, and I wasn't even sure why we were doing it. And then they tell you, I couldn't even tell if my work mattered. That is a gut punch for any leader. That is a sign of poor leadership communication. It's not just frustrating, it bleeds your organization of great talent, money, and time. So when communication breaks down, here's what happens. Your best people leave for places where they feel more valued. Teams miss deadlines because priorities are not clear. And then your promising leaders, they flame out and they're unable to rally their team. Initiatives stall because no one understands why they matter. Most leadership training focuses on strategy and decision-making. But what good is a great strategy if your leaders can't explain it, or they don't believe it? That's even worse. Or they can't convince teams to follow it. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through 5 communication skills that all of your leaders need to develop so that you can not only retain your top talent, but you increase the effectiveness of your leadership development programs. These skills are the ones that separate exceptional communicators from just the average ones. These directly impact culture, increase productivity, and increase your bottom line. And I'm going to show you how you can help your leaders develop these skills. So let's dive in. Let's start with one of the most critical skills that all your leaders need to have nailed down, and that is adaptive listening. This goes a lot deeper than like active listening because it's not about like nodding along and paying attention. Adaptive listening means listening to understand, to interpret, and to respond the right way so that you're helping people at work get what they need. So here's an example. Imagine a retail store where a frontline employee keeps flagging an issue to their manager that the customers are frustrated because this best-selling item is constantly out of stock. If their manager's like, yeah, sure must be frustrating for them, and then moves on, that's a real problem. They've acknowledged the issue, but they've done nothing to solve it. So here's how an adaptive listener that's managing that store would respond. They would still validate the floor manager's emotion. Maybe they say, oh man, that's frustrating. And then they clarify the issue. How long has this been happening? What product is it that customers are asking about? Then they can take action. They might call the supplier, update the inventory alerts, prevent the next shortage. That reinforces trust. They should thank the employee for raising the concern and make it really clear that their input matters. You see the difference? That is the shift from passive empathy to proactive leadership. So here's a quick checkpoint for your team. Next time someone raises a concern, encourage your leaders to reflect back what they heard and offer a clear next step. So here's a great example, a new one. So let's say one of the team members says, I can't get through all the requests on my desk. And the leader reflects and says, wow, it sounds like the volume is unmanageable right now. We need a short-term solution to solve this inbound peak in your work. So I'm going to approve budget to get you some help so you could focus on your higher stake work. Here's the big takeaway. Adaptive listeners don't just pay attention. They also help the speaker get what they need. And that builds a culture of trust and responsiveness. So get started with adaptive listening by having your leaders do these 3 things. First, they should ask themselves, what does this employee need from me right now? Sometimes it's just emotional validation, maybe celebrate a win or maybe commiserate a loss. And sometimes it's taking action to help them solve a problem. Sometimes it's just like, can you just help me make a judgment call? And sometimes it's just remember the information so you could inform something else later on. Then they can adapt their listening. To do this, they would focus on the emotions or what the next steps are, or what is the evaluation criteria or the details. A lot of time, the goal of the employee is very different from what the leader wants to do. And some leaders, they just jump in quickly, try to solve the problem. That's not always what the employee needs. Instead, your leader needs to focus on whatever it is that's going to help the employee meet their need. Finally, be ready to get it wrong. Turns out listening's hard because people are so messy. So there's a really good chance your leaders are going to get it wrong sometimes, but if they are reflective and honest about all the misses they make, it still builds towards a really strong listening culture because the employees are going to feel respected and heard. Plus, the chance to listen the right way is only the the very next meeting away for them. So if you want to dig even deeper into adaptive listening, my team wrote an amazing entire book on the topic, and I put a link into the description. The second skill all your leaders need is data storytelling. In other words, telling the story behind the data rather than just dumping numbers on people and hoping that the data speaks for itself, because it doesn't. And this is a critical shift that leaders have to make to drive real change. So most people present data as a list of facts, but the facts alone don't move people. Stories move people, and that's the power of data storytelling. So you turn raw numbers into something your team can understand and care about and act on. So here's an example. A head of marketing says, whoa, 2,800 people downloaded our ebook. Well, that's great. That's a fact, but it's totally flat. Now here's the same message told as a Duarte data story. 150 of the leads are from named account that could eclipse the size of our largest customer. So we need to allocate $5,000 to continue our account-based marketing to them and trigger executive outreach immediately. Now the team sees the problem and the opportunity. They're clear on the context of what to do next. So how do you help your leaders get there? You need to teach them the meaning matters test. Before including any statistic in a deck, have them ask, what does it mean? Why does this matter? That is the meaning matters test. So if the answer isn't obvious, it probably doesn't belong. And great leaders connect all those dots. They tell a clear story, and then they help their teams see the bigger picture. So start encouraging your leaders to turn dry statistics into clear and actionable stories. So in a nutshell, how can you help them build that skill first? Encourage them to ask, what's this mean? For every single number. This is going to help them kind of narrow down the data to what really matters. Next, explain to them the value of framing data with a real-world example. Even if it feels obvious, using an example can solidify anything that's new, any kind of new information. And last, you can encourage them to make the insights so clearly stated in the most simple form. So not everybody speaks data, and your leaders should accommodate for this. So if you're looking for different ways to help your leaders become data storytellers, my book, Data Story, it covers this concept in really great detail. So I've added the link in the description for you for that. The third skill is business storytelling. You have likely heard this so many times before, but still so many leaders don't implement it in their day-to-day work or lives. And so I'm talking about incorporating storytelling principles in all of your communication. Because storytelling isn't just for presentations or for sales meetings. Your leaders should weave it into everything they do. As they lead their teams, every conversation can be a small story, and it can be one that builds into and supports the larger narrative of the team's purpose and even their progress. So turning data into insights is important. But beyond that, people want to feel like they're part of something. And that's where understanding characters in a story is so powerful. Frame your team as the hero. Unpack how they're facing a challenge and they're all rising to meet it. So let's go back into our marketing story where a large amount of strategic accounts came in. Here's how you would put that into a 3-act structure. Act 1, show the status quo. You could say, 150 new leads at a desirable target company are waiting for us to respond to, but they won't wait long. If we don't move fast, someone else is going to capture their attention. Act 2 could be, our next biggest competitor is within reach of them, and winning now means putting marketing at the center of our company's new major success story. Everybody would want that. Then Act 3 might say, it's your creativity and your grit that's going to bring it home. You have everything you need to turn this moment into a milestone. That would be a pretty excited marketing team. So that's the power of business storytelling. It's not just about sharing a plan. It's about rallying people behind your mission. To help your leaders build this skill, first give them a framework. And watching my TED Talk is a great start. And for a deeper dive, you can check out our book, Resonate. And I left a link in the description. And on top of this, you should also encourage them to practice. Storytelling, you'll feel awkward at first, and the more they practice, the better and the faster they'll get at it. It'll be more natural. They could also start small. They could use it in one-on-ones or team meetings before they apply it to a great big presentation. And lastly, they should always ask for feedback. Hey, did that land? Did this motivate you? And their audience is the best one to guide to better storytelling. The fourth skill is change communication. So imagine your leaders roll out a new tool or a new process, but their teams are pushing back hard. They don't like the change and they're refusing to get on board. So even high-performing teams can experience friction during change. The real test of leadership is how they respond in that moment. So how do you help your leaders communicate their change initiatives more effectively? And you start by teaching them the venturescape. This is a simple way to map where their teams are during change. It's made up of 5 phases, and it helps your leaders determine what kind of fuel does your team need to accomplish the goal. So first is the dream phase. This is when change still feels like a possibility. The team needs a moment of inspiration, maybe something that'll spark belief in a better future. And leaders should paint the vision clearly and connect it to a really deep purpose. And then they can leap. And this is where the first real steps are taken. This is where uncertainty creeps in. Maybe the team needs a moment where they're like, okay, I'm in. Some sort of signal that says, this is the direction we're going to go. Here's why it matters. And then the fight phase, this is the messy middle, and that's where resistance, doubt, consequences, they might just revolt. And this calls for a moment of bravery. And this is where the team, they need to be encouraged to stand together in the face of resistance, become heroes. If the team stays engaged, they move into the climb. Now this is the slow grind, the slog. Effort is high and the wins are small. And leaders should create these moments of endurance where you're recognizing the progress and you're spotlighting their grit and you're reminding the team that traction is building. And finally, they arrive. The change has taken hold. And this is the time for a moment of reflection, and you celebrate what the team's accomplished and you set the stage for what's next. To help your leaders communicate through change, you really need to start by mapping the stage that the employees are in. Then they should match that moment. Train them to deliver the kind of message that the team needs to hear, whether that's inspiration, commitment, bravery, endurance, or reflection. And then lastly, remind them, be human. Change communication is not about spin. It isn't about trust. Trust is built one honest, sincere moment at a time. And we cover this process extensively in our book, Illuminate. And if you want a deeper dive, I put a link into the description for you. So next we're going to talk about handling the press. This is the 5th and final skill that all leaders need. And it's often the surprising one, because handling the press, most leaders just assume the media is someone else's job until suddenly it's theirs. So think back to the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. 11 lives were lost, millions of gallons of crude oil in the ocean. And BP's CEO, Tony Hayward, he stepped in front of the camera and said, wow, I just want my life back. That one sentence made BP look insensitive and self-interested. And it became a case study in how not to lead under pressure. So ask yourself, if one of your leaders had to speak to the press tomorrow, would they be ready? And today there's so many cell phone cameras just capturing everything. There could be a crisis right in the moment on the fly. It could create even a bigger crisis if they don't do well. So could they stay composed? Can they take responsibility? And can they deliver a clear and empathetic message? One single media appearance or user-generated social post can define a career and shape public opinion of your brand. To prepare your leaders, run simulations, pull them into mock crisis interviews, give them 20 minutes to prep, put them on camera, ask the hard questions, then do a debrief. What worked? What didn't? What could you do better? What could you better next time? And if one of your leaders is likely to be a public-facing spokesperson, get them coaching. Hire a coach. You want to make sure that they know how to stay calm under pressure, slow down their cadence, ground their body language, and manage their tone. To lead with empathy, you could acknowledge what people are feeling before jumping into facts or getting defensive. Take ownership and accept responsibility where it's due without speculation, blame, especially not spin. Stick to your messages and train them to land 2 to 3 points, no matter how tough the questions get. So when your leaders have this skill down, they'll be prepared to answer anywhere. Picture the leader at your company who struggles the most with communication. And that's the one who kind of shuts down under pressure. Maybe they fumble through meetings or they never really connect well to their team. Now imagine them 6 weeks from now with the right training. They're listening different. They're telling great stories and they're handling incredible initiatives and change and they're owning the room. What would that be worth to your business? Because when you help your leaders communicate well, you don't just make them more effective. You build alignment, you build trust, you build momentum. Now, if you're thinking, well, my leaders actually struggle more with communicating up to our execs, then watch this short video next. And if it was helpful, give it a like and subscribe for more real-world tools to help your leaders thrive. And I'll see you next time.